Hey guys, today we're going over an unusual vintage woodworking tool. These might look like awls at first, but they're not. This one is the Irwin 900, which is probably the most iconic version of the tool you've never heard of. When we look at just the tip, you can see it has this conical threaded shape. This is for creating a pilot hole in wood before putting a screw in. It's called a screw starter. It'd probably be more accurate to call it a hole starter, but that's what it's called. Because of the conical tip and fine threads, the tool almost pulls itself into the wood. It requires very little downward pressure to operate. I've also seen it referred to as a gimlet. Now to me, a gimlet has those auger-style flutes in the shank, which these don't have. Screw starters have been around in some form or another for at least a couple hundred years. They're not as common now, but they're still out there. Here's a more modern version that I got a while back at Menards. The tip on it has a different taper. The threads aren't as sharp, and the vintage one has a flat paddle point on the tip, which the modern one doesn't have. To test these out, I set up a little experiment here. We want to see what's the easiest method of starting a screw. I'm going to compare these to using a push drill or the old standby method of just poking the wood with an awl. We'll start with the vintage Irwin. This is super easy. The tip on this is so sharp it almost threads itself in. I hardly have to apply any pressure at all. The more modern version, the tip just isn't sharp enough. I have to really push down on it to get it to bite in. It's like at some point they cheapened out the design, so it's no wonder why these went out of style. It's taking more time and more effort, which already defeats the purpose of the tool. The awl method, where we just poke the awl in there, all this really does is mark the hole. It's just kind of smushing the wood fibers out of the way. Obviously a drill is the easiest way. I wanted to try out a push drill, since that's what woodworkers back in the day would have used. This one needs to be lubed. It's not retracting all the way, but it works. Now let's drive the screws in and see which method makes the screw easier to drive in. This one's pretty easy. The vintage screw starter gave us a nice pilot hole. We'll just put these in about halfway. The modern screw starter is about the same. It took more effort to make the hole, but driving the screw in is about the same effort. The hole from the awl definitely takes more effort. It doesn't really make a pilot hole, just a little divot. So if you're currently using an awl, I would definitely recommend trying out a screw starter. It's a lot easier. Yeah, the one we use the push drill on is the easiest, since we actually drilled the pilot hole. That's no surprise. Now, this experiment was done on a regular pine 2x4. The benefits of the screw starter really start to show up when used with hardwood. It has no problem cutting a hole in this piece of maple, whereas the awl barely even marked it. So if you do woodworking and you need to make a pilot hole for a screw, but don't want to bust out the power drill, I'd go ahead and pick up one of these Irwins. They're small enough to stick in the pocket of an apron, or just leave one sitting out on your workbench. I'd avoid the modern ones. Look for a vintage Irwin 900 on eBay. If you have to have a new one, Garrett Wade makes a copy of the Irwin. At $15, it's about the same price as the vintage ones on eBay. That's it for this video. Let me know if you knew what this tool was before watching the video. I'm sure most people haven't even heard of it. See you later. Bye.